begin mocking the engine and trans into the car. But first we have to install the new engine mount assembly on the driver's seat.
Alrighty, welcome back to Outlaw Fab AZ. I'm Jeff, and this is Tim.
Hey.
Tell me a little bit about your background. How'd you get into this hot rod world and building cars and racing?
Well, we've known each other. We got to meet each other through work.
Yeah.
So you were a trainer, and then we got to know a little bit about each other. I got to know that I learned that you worked for John Force Racing and was on this traveling pit crew and into racing. So then that opened up conversations about the stuff I've done through the years, and so it started out. I was pretty young. I had a good friend of mine who I'm still friends with that we went to high school together. That he invited me over to his neighborhood one day in South Scottsdale, and I went over there, and his next door neighbor had an old stock car, and it was a '55 Chevy, and I don't think it had a straight piece of sheet metal on it. It was like one big wrinkled crunch.
Yeah.
But it had a small, yep.
How a lot of those start out.
Yep, and so it had a small block Chevy in it with open headers and a Muncie 4-speed and a roll cage and a seat, and I fell in love, man. And when I heard it run, and I was still riding a bicycle. I was probably about 14 years old, and I never left his house after that. I was there, hanging around, doing whatever we could do. And his son was a little younger than me, Big Vince. You met, I don't know if you met Big Vince yet.
I haven't met Big Vince.
So Big Vinny.
So you kind of got into it just.
And he was a little younger than me, and Kenny, who lived next door, or 2 doors down, I should say. Mm-hmm. And so we went over there and we learned how to weld on Frank's old Buzz box welder, and Frank would say, and sometimes we call him Grandpa Frank, but Frank would say, "Here, go get the rear end out of that car and unbolt it, and we're going to put it in this car, and we're going to take this part off of that car and we're going to put it in this car." We just started by hanging out at Frank's house, Big Vinny's dad.
Yeah, working on the dirt track.
And working on the old stock cars, and then he was racing at Manzanita Speedway, which is now defunct. It was at 35th Avenue and Broadway, but he was racing that stock car class was called Claimers, and it was pretty much all 55, 56, and 57 Chevys. And so we, that old 55 was so beat up, and so it was kind of a junker.
Yeah.
So he wanted to build a new race car. So we went in the backyard and pulled out a real nice 56 Chevy Bel Air that had all the glass and all the chrome and all the stainless on it still, 2-door hardtop, and no engine in it, but it was a complete car. And I still remember today, we took hammers and big screwdrivers and knocked the chrome off of it and smashed the windows out of it with sledgehammers and stripped that car out. And we cut the roof off of it, and the roll cage got cut out of the 55 and moved over into the 56. And I think that was a year later. I was about 15 then, and that was the very first race car I ever helped build. I was 15 years old.
Yeah, it all came really, soon to you at a young age, so pretty cool stuff.
So we, through the years, then that developed. He raced, those were Claimers, and then we moved up to modified stocks, and then we moved to late models. And at the end of the stock car era that Frank raced, we were running dirt late models on the half mile at Manzanita with I mean, that was a tube chassis. Well, it was a Camaro subframe car, but a tube chassis with, you know, quick change rear end, 406 small block aluminum head on alcohol, converterless power glide transmission. I built my first homemade backyard built fifth coil rear suspension for it. And we were just local yokel backyard racers, but we were out there competing with and there was a lot of real famous race car drivers that raced here at Manzanita. You know, we had, you know, Bill Cheeseburg and Marion Smiley and Carl Trimmer, and those were guys that, you know, were capable of running with all the dirt late model guys of the nation and compete and be competitive with. And of course, Manzanita became famous for, you know, the Western World Dirt Late Model Championships and the Western World Sprint Car Championships. And then my career progressed. I started helping guys, and then I ended up in the machine shop. I worked in the machine shop for about 3 years during the early 80s and learned the engine building trade and was building, you know, started building engines and race engines, and then I was building all the engines for all our stock cars and all for the late model. And the guy that owned the machine shop was racing sprint cars, so I would actually crew on sprint cars on Saturday night.
Then you do your dirt late models.
And then they raced sprint cars one weekend and dirt late models the next weekend. It was the opposite schedule. So the Saturday night I'd be there with sprint crew and sprint car, and then the next Saturday night I'd be with the dirt late models. And then Friday nights was modified stocks, street stocks, all the other classes that they raced at Manzanita. And by then, Big Vinny, we were building Chevelles for Big Vinny, and he started out racing street stocks, and then he went into modified stocks. And it's interesting that you're called Outlaw Fab because we raced under the name Outlaw Racing, and it was Frank Outlaw and Vince Outlaw, and those guys were they were pretty well known at Manzanita, and I was, you know, their crew chief, engine builder, main pit crew guy, you know, whatever we needed to do is what we did, you know, because we did everything ourselves.
Yep.
So,
I mean, that's what you got to do to get it in, you know. To get into that racing world is sometimes you got to think outside the box. That's the cool thing with Oldsmobile cars is that you can't just go into a book or a magazine or something like that. You can't just go in there and buy everything you want. So a lot of this stuff you kind of just got to get into and you just got to start making it. So that's kind of how I started getting into all this stuff as well. You know, when we first got into, you know, the racing of the Oldsmobile world, I mean, they just didn't have a big parts inventory that you could just go in there, not like the Chevy stuff. You know, everyone makes anything that you can imagine.
Small block, big block Chevys, you can buy everything you need.
Yep, the big block Oldsmobile stuff, I mean, you got to think outside the box. And I think that's kind of what's appealing to me, is that you kind of get into, you know, that build aspect when you're kind of, you know, you get real creative on stuff and you try to make things work that necessarily not always should, but I mean, in the end, it ends up paying off. And to me, it's more rewarding, you know.
I love that.
I think that's what makes hot rodding fun, is that everyone kind of has their own little piece that makes it interesting to them. For me, I like the build aspect of the car. You know, I like the creativity piece of it. You know, the freedom of having something that is so large be more or less your canvas, instead of, you know, like some people may get in there and they may do some kind of, you know, painting or drawing or whatever makes them happy. And then, you know, this is kind of what I feel like is, you know, more of a release for me, is that I like that aspect that you can get in there and you can build this car how you want it. And, you know, most people, you know, I mean, the car world is very accepting to very unique and different things. Not everyone wants to have that car that's a numbers matching car that, you know,
that purist aspect.
Yeah, that some people like to have. You know, for me, it's like, well, what can I turn that car into? Like, how can I make that car a representation of me? You know, and that's kind of how I got into building these types of cars, is is, you know, it's that, you know, thinking outside of the box and trying to imagine, you know, well, I could do this, but I'm going to do this. You know, that part of it, I think, is what
Everybody
excites me.
else is already doing that.
Yeah,
I think I'll go this way.
yeah. So I've always kind of been on the edge of something else. You know, like I'm not the kind of guy that, you know, I like to do what everyone else is doing. It's just not my thing.
Well, and
So-
I love that because I think that's what makes the hobby interesting.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you know, so all those years of racing and you know, I've had a few race cars, but I was mostly involved on the building, fabrication, assembly, and kind of the crew chief aspect of it, making the car handle and making it run all night, making it stay cool, making it do all the things it needed to do to be a competitive car.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's what makes it fun, you know, and that's what I think is the real draw and the real hook. And I think that's why we're going to work well together on this particular project, because we both kind of have that, you know, that type of a mentality of it doesn't have to be this way for it to be 100% right.
Well,
it doesn't always have to be right. You just have to get it running.
yeah.
You know, and that's how, you know, you growing up in the stock car world is, you know, sometimes you got to think outside the box to make the show.
That's exactly it.
And that's what racing is. A lot of people don't understand that aspect of it.
Well,
you
you
know,
know that because you worked on a professional team.
Yeah.
You know, for myself, you know, I never really was on a professional team, but I was on a lot of teams where we were, you know, a like-minded group of guys, and it was all about going to the track and trying to be successful. You know, what does it take to finish the race? What does it take to get there? And that mentality, you know what I mean, has stayed with me. Whatever it takes to get it done mentality is, I think, how you get through projects and get through things. Guys take on projects like this and stall out because they can't get past a segment that they're maybe not sure about or don't understand completely, or you know, that's not their field of expertise. So, you know, it's something that you have to, you know, sometimes you just power through.
You push through it.
You push through it and figure it out, you know. And so, I mean, you've got a heavy drag race, but I drag raced a little bit. I mean, here's what's interesting about me is I had, you know, we dirt tracked, and then I had a buddy that drag raced, and Steve used to come and pit crew for us when we stock car raced, and then we'd go pit crew for him when he drag raced. So we raced, he had a big block powered 67 GTO that we raced, and then
Big Chevy or?
with a 396 in it,
Okay.
or a 402, you know, 30 over 396, Chevy big block, right? And then he wanted to go faster. He eventually back half the car, put big tires on it, and then we raced at Division 6 NRHRA because Division 7 NHRA wasn't around yet. So, but we raced Division 6 all over. So we went, you know, raced all over California. We went to Vegas. We went to, you know, we raced in Tucson. We raced, well, of course, we raced at Beeline Dragway, was still open here in Phoenix, and old Mel Larson's, which was Phoenix Dragway. So I built him a couple engines and helped him with his car. And then he went on and bought one of Gordy Rivera's ex-Pro Stock cars, and we converted that to a big block glide car, and he drag raced that. And then from there,
So you've got plenty of drag racing experience.
the last thing I did really was the off-road team. I built a number of LS-based engines for them and crew chief that deal, and we went to King of the Hammers 5 years in a row, and I was the crew chief engine builder. So from 13 to 18 or 19, whenever it was. So that was so the off-road, that I delved into the off-road racing world, which is a whole nother brutal beat down event. That I mean, it's all about preparation and trying to put the race truck together to the very best of your ability to go out there and finish the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't win anything if you don't finish. So you got to make it to the end of the race to win.
Well, we
And
always
that's how
said,
that works.
you must first finish to finish first.
Yeah.
So-
So that's, I mean,
So,
100%. I mean, it's what it takes to make these types of things happen. And
so,
you know, the good thing about this car is that I have zero intentions of ever making it a big tire car. It will always be a small tire car.
well,
And I think for me is it adds kind of like another aspect of the struggle. You know, trying to get all that power to the ground with the amount of weight that it has.
with what's going to fit in this car.
Yes.
With a tire that's going to fit in this
Yeah.
car. Yeah.
Yeah, and so far this car has done a 60 foot of about a 142 so far. Granted, I think that was based on how much power it made at the time. It's just all she could do.
Yeah.
But I feel like we can probably get this thing down in the 120s at some point with some of these other combinations and really get this thing down, get this ET down where, you know, I think we'll be chopping down at the tree. We'll put it that way. And we'll just try to get this thing as quick as we possibly can. And that way we have a good, you know, solid test between each one of these combinations that we're going to be doing and testing. And that way we kind of have an idea of, you know, roughly where we're going. And I think it'll be a good test and something that's going to make for a pretty good, you know, showing. But, you know, I feel like we need to get some work done.
Yeah.
Let's get some things done, and let's see if we can start getting a couple things accomplished on this. I think first we're going to, get into replacing that engine mount on the frame.
Right.
I think we're going to do that first. Then I think before we go try to mock that transmission up into that tunnel, I think we need to make a template for the floor on
Fix that hole.
patching
Yeah, fix
up
that
the
hole in the floor
Yeah,
for the 4-speed shifter.
Either
Okay.
we end up, you know, like you had suggested, you know, maybe doing like a patch panel and just riveting it in.
Pop riveting it
I'm
in.
okay with that in case if we ever decide to go back to a Muncie in this car. I don't know why that would ever happen, but it could happen. You know, it gives you that opportunity to just go back to where it was. You know, something I didn't even think of was, you know, putting that patch in there. I was just so focused on, hey, let's go weld this hole shut in this thing, and I think that, you know, I think that's going to help us. You know, you're going to give me another aspect of, you know, this build process, and you know, like, well, maybe that's not 100% of a good idea. Let's try this too. You know, so I think it'll work well, and I think our skill sets are going to match up really well. So
All right.
after we get
So
done
what
with
else?
that, I say we're gonna I have a mock-up block.
Okay.
So we can stick that thing in there and we can bolt the transmission up to it, try to figure out where that cross member is going to sit, make sure that we don't have to do any trimming of the tunnel or do any of that kind of business to get this AD.
The 4L80 is a little bit bigger gearbox.
Sure is. So I think probably where we need to start is either we can get the car off the hoist because there's not really a whole lot of room to work on it, or we can try to do it where it's at. We can just try raising it up and we can kind of see where things go.
Well, let's try it where it's at,
Mhm.
and if the hoist becomes too much of a hindrance, then we'll know that we need to get it off of there. So,
Yeah. Well, luckily the block isn't too terribly heavy. We can get it in there if we need to. So,
all right, sounds good.
you know, at least get it into the general area. But I think first we'll start with that motor mount. We'll get to work.
All right,
What do you
sounds
think?
good.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
Well, welcome aboard, bud.
All right, man.
Cool.
First, we're going to begin by placing the 480 on the trans jack. then I'm going to begin prepping the 455 for mock-up. I acquired 2 cores here locally, and we determined this block is another possible candidate for use at a later date. So I'm going to secure the caps on the block and coat the engine with a light coat of WD-40 to prevent it from rusting until it's used. Tim and Jason are going to get to work installing a new engine mount setup I picked up from a member off of Real Old's Power. First, they have to remove the old engine mount from the frame side. While removing the old frame mount, one of the old mounting bolts stripped. Tim and Jason decided it would be best to cut it off to remove the old engine mount. decided to clean the crossmember up. The crossmember had 50 years of grease and grime buildup, so we decided to give it a fresh coat of semi-gloss black paint after cleaning. Now we're ready to install the new frame mount for the engine. Now I'm going to prep the mock-up block to go into the car, and I run a tap in the block mount bolt holes, and then I mount the lifting chain for the engine crane. we're finally ready to test fit the Stage 2 480E from Jake's Performance. With the transmission in place, we attempted to use a factory crossmember for our trans mount. After a quick test fit, it was obvious it simply just won't work.
Gonna mock this engine and transmission in. We got this thing in here. It's like we're gonna need to invest in a different cross member. The cross member I got, the factory one, is just simply not gonna work. It's the geometry isn't right, everything's not right. So I think I'm gonna invest in a different transmission cross member.
Or build one.
Or maybe possibly build one, I'm not real sure. We'll just have to see if it fits the budget or not. So that's kind of where we're at. But mock-up motors in, transmissions in. That's pretty much about it.
Give me love. I don't care for the high. I came for the low.